Where is the author writing the book of Luke pulling their information from in the early life of the Jesus character? I just want to give some answers here briefly in this presentation while still touching on this divine child motif. Where does the author writing the book of Luke get their information from regarding the early life of the Jesus character? Did this actually happen? Is this the actual early life of the Jesus character? Well, we can know that, and we're going to see in this presentation, that the kind of scenes that the author writing the book of Luke fixes to their main character, it's not original, it's not unique, it comes from the past. They're simply reworking it to fit their intended religion. We're going to see how Buddha, Siddhartha, fits into this role, and we're going to see how the prophecy, the epic poetry of Virgil also foreshadows the Roman Messiah. This is what Virgil predicted, the Roman Messiah, of which was heaped on, and which is why the Jesus character is perpetually Greek to this day, to the Jesus character's main narrative function. Now, to begin with, we find in Luke 2:25 to 38, Simeon and Anna recognize that the infant Jesus is the Messiah during his presentation at the temple. What we are going to explore at this point in time are the similarities with certain older myths exposing cultural mythological influences on the Jesus narrative. Wise elders, wise elders play a crucial role in affirming the extraordinary, the supernatural destiny of a child. This is a motif that is passed down. This isn't unique to the story. Now, Simeon, a righteous individual, recognizes the infant Jesus as the Messiah during his presentation at the temple. He declares, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation. Anna, 84-year-old prophetess, acknowledges Jesus' significance and speaks of him to those awaiting redemption in Jerusalem. Their advanced age and prophetic roles affirm Jesus' divine purpose. This narrative highlights the fulfillment of messianic expectations within a Hellenistic Jewish context. This is not the context of Genesis to Malachi. No one's looking for this kind of, no one's trying to behave like this. When they see a child or a child is, that's not the intention. This is Hellenistic Jewish literature. Now, transition that into the Buddhist tradition where Asita, an elderly sage, visits newborn Siddhartha and predicts he will be a great king or spiritual leader. Asita recognizes the child's extraordinary future but weeps, knowing he won't witness it, just like Simeon. And remember, this transition isn't a transition that is coming after Luke. Asita, the Buddhist tradition, this is long before many generations before the Jesus character is brought into literary script. He understands as Sita he will not, just like Simeon, witness it, reflecting both the joy and sorrow. His prophecy presents two distinct paths for Siddhartha, one of worldly power and another of spiritual enlightenment. This duality contrasts with Simeon's singular messianic vision for Jesus, focused solely on salvation. Asita's emotional response highlights the weight of the prophecy given to him and the potential for greatness and loss. This is the same scene, the Siddhartha and the Asita scene, same scene that is placed onto the Jesus character in the book of Luke. Now, Simeon identifies the infant Jesus as the Messiah during his presentation. This is the prophetical recognition here. Proclaims Jesus as the light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel. Anna, the prophetess, acknowledges Jesus' significance and speaks of him to those awaiting redemption. Simeon and Anna, in their elderly wisdom, this is the elderly wisdom motif for children that are supposed to be divine. They embody wisdom and prophetic insight. Their advanced age lends credibility to their recognition of the Jesus character's role. They fulfill the tradition of elders affirming significant spiritual events. That's the only reason this scene is in here, to continue the tradition of affirming spiritual events. Simeon declares he has seen God's salvation, affirming Jesus' divine nature. Anna gives thanks to the Lord, emphasizing Jesus' role in redemption. Their testimonies highlight Jesus as the fulfillment of messianic prophecies. Again, not in the same context or lens or viewpoint from Genesis to Malachi. in the Hebrew scriptures. This is Hellenistic Jewish literature. Simeon expresses peace, saying, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. This reflects his fulfillment in witnessing the promised Messiah. His peace symbolizes the culmination of his lifelong hope. Anna responds with gratitude, speaking of Jesus to all seeking redemption. Her acknowledgement reinforces the communal recognition of Jesus' significance. Together, Simeon and Anna affirm the divine intervention in their human history, which is why the Buddha Siddhartha transition is needed. It needs to be in this story. The author of Luke knows what they're doing. We don't. But the author of Luke knows what they're doing, and what they're doing is a literary prescription for their main character. They understand this never happened. They understand this is not real. Nevertheless, they have to put it in the story because it is continuing a lineage of tradition, literary tradition. Now, in Virgil's fourth Eclogue, now this is 40 BC. Virgil's fourth Eclogue foretells a child who will usher in a golden age reflecting divine foresight. This aligns with the trope of wise figures recognizing a child's significance. Early Christians interpreted this as foreshadowing Christ. Christ, put any name at the beginning of that. It could be Jesus, it could be anyone. This is their foreshadowing. They're foreshadowing. In a Roman, Greco-Roman, this has nothing to do with Genesis to Malachi. They have their own. They have their own, and they're placing it on to the Jesus character. The child symbolizes hope and renewal after Roman civil wars. This vision parallels Jesus' role in Luke as a harbinger of transformative change. It highlights shared motifs of divine favor and new beginnings across traditions. This child from Virgil's Eclogue from 40 BC, it was placed onto the early character of the Jesus movement. Now, early Christians, notably Emperor Constantine, interpreted Virgil's fourth Eclogue as a prophecy of Christ, linking the poem's Virgo to Mary and the child to Jesus. The reinterpretation bridged Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian traditions. This isn't actually Hebrew Christian. This is Hellenistic Jewish / Hellenistic Jewish Christian traditions, showing how early Christians adapted pagan narratives to align with their theology. Cultural exchange facilitated the diffusion of prophetic ideas and motifs across these traditions. This interconnectedness, while ruining the landscape of the Hebrew scriptures, bolstered the Christian religion in a Roman and Hellenistic world. So that's important to, be cognizant of, because while we're trying to go to Isaiah 7 and verse 14 and to somehow rework a virgin shall conceive a child, when that phrase in the Hebrew has nothing to do with what it would translate to in the Greek, we are not knowing that there is already a Greco-Roman prophecy foretold by Virgil about a divine child, a Roman Messiah that is to come, that early Christians and then leading up into the time of Constantine believed was the Jesus character. And so reworking a narrative of this divine child, quote unquote divine child, not really a divine child, but they must rework it for the sake of literary tradition. And then by the time Constantine gets there, to further validate what's really going on in their movement from a literary perspective. Now, in these parallels, these wise elders, they recognize a significant child that's seen with Asita, Simeon, and Virgil as a seer. These figures affirm the child's role in bringing monumental change. This highlights the interplay between wisdom, prophecy, and youth. Now, this is also cultural because there was cultural exchange in this period at this time between shared ideas and religious traditions. Trade and diffusion allowed similar motifs to appear across traditions. These parallels reflect storytelling adapted to fit contexts of culture and of spirituality. The elderly figures like Simeon, Anna, and Asita prophesy a child's divine purpose. Their advanced age underscores their authority in recognizing greatness. This motif emphasizes the reverence for aged wisdom, for prophecy. Now, this divine child motif continues. A divine child linked to a new era, Virgil, parallels Jesus' role, also Buddha, in Luke. Virgil's fourth eclogue mirrors this with a child ushering a golden age. This motif affirms the child's role in fulfilling cultural expectations. Now, in Luke 2, just to conclude, 25 to 38, there are really strikingly similar motifs shared with older mythologies, many others. I'm highlighting Siddhartha and Virgil because those are the most two absolutely blatant. Asita's prophecy of Siddhartha and Virgil's fourth eclogue in Greco-Roman literature, they center on the same things. This isn't unique when what we're reading in the Matthews and in the Lukes and in the Marks and in the Johns. None of this is unique. This is all literature taken, reworked in order to facilitate a new transition. Now, these parallels highlight cultural interconnections, suggesting influences on Luke's gospel. The similarities reflect universal storytelling patterns. Wise elders, for example, affirming a child's destiny adapted to Luke's Hellenistic Jewish context. Understanding these connections, we're able to also understand the script that is attached to the gospel narrative. Luke in present context. To comprehend the myth behind the literature. I'm going to say that again. To just comprehend the myth behind the literature. There's a reason why the author writing, Mark, does not do this. Mark's written at a different time. Mark's written at a different time by a different community with a different philosophical goal who can care less about these flowery motives in literary transitional history, mythological literary transitional history that needs to be adapted, that needs to fit into the narrative. And these are the sources for this. But these are some questions that I just wanted to give some answers to of where these things come from. They're not unique, they're not original. They don't really serve a purpose that is connected to anything from Genesis to Malachi, but they serve a purpose for a literary traditional lineage going back to the Greco-Roman times in order to fulfill certain things that need to be fulfilled in order for your character, if you're living in that time, in order for your character, your literary character, to be taken as credible, to be taken as valid. And not only to be taken as credible and valid, but to be taken as credible and valid by the government for use. The whole thing that we don't know, different time period, how to get into the state. How do you get into the state? And not, this is very specific, a very specific cue. How does your spirituality get into the state? Because when you can do that in this point in time, you will rule the world. So you have to script things in order that are going to stay and be and held and upheld continually, perpetually mainstream. And this is mainstream. This never happened, never will, never was thought to. This is literary, mainstream, Greco-Roman pagan literature in a Hellenistic Jewish context. So to want to give that brief answer and to continue this train of thought on the divine child motif.